Hello class, welcome to another pre-recorded lecture. In this lecture, I'll be talking about shared leadership. The last time we spoke about the biblical foundation of shared leadership. We're on our three-part series on shared leadership. So today we'll be talking more on shared leadership. In this, we'll be talking about a definition of shared leadership, what it is, how it is operationalized or defined. Shared leadership is the distribution of leadership functions among multiple team members. So again, it's the distribution of leadership functions and it's among multiple team members. And so notice that it's not just only among the elected leader. Shared leadership is a group-centric type of leadership, describing the mutual interactive influence among individuals in groups. The objective of such groups is to lead one another towards group or organizational goal achievement. So again, it's group-centric, is mutual interaction. Shared or distributed leadership is a mutual process, It's a bi-directional process of influence that is characterized by collaborative decision-making and shared responsibility among team members, whereby team members lead each other towards the achievement of goals. So again, it's collaborative decision-making and shared responsibility among team members. I like to think of it this way. Shared leadership is simply the sharing of leadership functions with others. You distribute those leadership functions with others. Central to shared leadership is a notion that more than one member of the group can enact leadership or exert influence on the team. So again, central to shared leadership is the notion that more than one member of the group can enact leadership. So not only the elected leader is able to enact leadership or exert influence on the team, but also more than one person can do that. The idea of distributing leadership functions among team members is different from the traditional approaches to leadership. The traditional leadership approaches are like trait theory, behavioral theory, the Greatman theory, are focused on the ability of leaders to influence group to accomplish goals. So again, traditional leadership models like, for example, trait theory, behavioral theory, or even the Greatman theory, their goals are that only the elected leader exert that influence on the group. But with shared leadership, anyone can enact leadership or influence others. Different types, let's talk about the different types of shared leadership. The first type of shared leadership that we have is cumulative shared leadership. Cumulative shared leadership, and the next one is overall shared leadership, So we have cumulative shared leadership, overall shared leadership, shared visionary leadership. And also we have shared authentic leadership. So 4 types of shared leadership: cumulative shared leadership, overall shared leadership, shared visionary leadership, and shared authentic leadership. Those are the different types. Let's talk about the traditional and shared leadership compared. The differences or similarities between traditional leadership models or leadership styles and shared leadership. Let's compare them. The first is shared leadership is a simultaneous, ongoing, mutual influence process that involves peer. So notice in shared leadership that there is a lateral. Notice that there is an upward and a downward influences on the team members. Shared leadership goes beyond the elected leader. Shared leadership moves away from the concept of unity of command towards the emergent process of mutual influence. Shared leadership focuses on processes and relationships instead of traits and behaviors. So shared leadership again stresses distributed influence, while traditional approaches stress concentrated influence. Notice that. So again, the traditional approaches stresses concentrated influence where only one person can enact leadership, but with shared leadership, it's a mutual influence and not concentrated influence, or distributed influence. And with traditional leadership, what you find is that you have vertical downward influence, but with shared leadership, you have downward, lateral, and upward. There are several benefits of shared leadership. Several benefits. So shared leadership is associated with stronger bonds among team members. Stronger bonds among team members. So when shared leadership is practiced, research has shown that the bond between team members gets stronger. Shared leadership is linked to trust, cohesion, and commitment among team members. So when shared leadership is practiced, the trust grows in team members, the team becomes more cohesive, and then they're more committed to the goals to be achieved. Shared leadership decreases communication difficulties. Yes, it decreases communication difficulties when leadership functions are shared. When there is upward, lateral, and downward influence, it decreases communication difficulties. Shared leadership improves performance. So it's linked to more effectiveness at work. And so these are just some of the benefits associated with shared leadership. Also, it's very important that leaders and organizers of groups and also managers and so forth, that they understand that there are certain limitations. There are some limitations in relation to shared leadership, and that shared leadership is not fitting for every leadership context, or does not fit with every leadership context. So let's talk about, some of the limitations of shared leadership. Varying degrees of association. So the different forms of shared leadership that we talked about, such as cumulative shared leadership, overall shared leadership, and shared visionary leadership and shared authentic leadership, may have varying degrees of strength in the association to the efficacy factors highlighted before, such as trust and cohesion, decreased of communication difficulties. So there might be varying levels of association with the different types. Next is that lack of control studies as it relates to shared leadership. There is no known control study that evaluates the effectiveness of the different types of shared leadership. And when we're talking about control studies, is where you have a control group and they're compared to the different types are compared to that control group, or even, you might have compared to traditional leadership as well. So you have control group, you can have traditional leadership being practiced, as well as shared leadership being practiced in the different, sphere. And then we all compare those at the end of the study and see how it works out more than the placebo effect or the control group. Control research studies are needed to examine the different types of shared leadership to see if each type links to team effectiveness, improved performance, and the achievement of goals, and also decreased of communication among team members. Next is potential risk to confidentiality. When leadership functions or responsibilities are shared with team members, then there is a potential risk to confidentiality. Shared leadership has the potential to put at risk the confidential information of workers, customers, and business partners. And some of the information that are at risk could be workers' social security numbers, salary information, as well as sensitive information associated with company business partners. It could also be like, business secrets. It could be trademarks and so forth. Leaders who engage in shared leadership must institute appropriate safeguards to mitigate the potential risk to confidentiality. And so you can have a need to know policy and so forth, and you can have where each person pledge a confidentiality to pledge or sign to confidentiality. Group dynamics. There are concerns related to how shared leadership changes within a group. So we don't know what are the changes as it relates to group dynamics when leadership functions are shared. We don't know that impact, in terms of, the sharing when, leadership function is shared with team members from the standpoint of the elected leader. The research literature is lacking in relation to how the mutual sharing of influence impacts group dynamics and its consequences. So we don't know the group dynamics or the impacts, shared leadership has on the group or the consequences of the sharing of such information. Next one is blurring of boundaries. Blurring of boundaries. Leaders should be mindful that the mutual sharing of influence might blur the boundaries between appointed or elected leaders and other organizational members or workers. So the blurring of boundaries is another limitation. Lacks pointed course of direction. So if there are certain situations where there is a pointed course of direction that is needed, shared leadership lacks that pointed course of this direction. This leadership style may not work in situations where group members need more pointed direction or are less likely to take the initiative. And so again, shared leadership is simply the sharing of leadership functions with others, and we have different types of shared leadership, and we have benefits related to shared leadership such as cohesion, trust, and we have decrease in communication difficulties, we have performance and so forth. And I hope that this lecture was beneficial, and knowing the importance and the benefits of shared leadership. And next time we'll talk about how we can implement shared leadership put shared leadership in practice. See you next time.